but could you ever imagine being the mother?
Most of my mourning was actually not as a sister. It was as a mom myself, putting myself in my mom's shoes. I was thinking of my own children and thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine how that feels.
Are you feeling like you're carrying that as a burden?
There was like a lot of guilt because I blame myself for the bad choice that I made in choosing his to be with his dad. I should have known. I was very young. I was 21 years old and probably immature. And when I met him, and what happened was I had gotten pregnant.
If you could get a message to him, what would you say to him now?
I love him, and I always thank him for the way that he loved me. That I received his love and I felt his love. There's not a day that he was here.
Hey everyone, welcome to Conversations with New Beginnings. My name is Teray, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is about meaningful conversations that uplift, empower, and inspire transformation. Before we begin, please help us by taking a quick pre-survey. Your perspective helps us shape conversations that truly uplift, empower, and inspire transformation. Also, wait till the end for another quick message from me. I hope you enjoy this episode.
One, I want to first thank you for both for being able to accept my invitation. This isn't an easy topic. And a lot of times it sounds easy in theory that, yes, I can talk about that. But when it hits home, it just hits different, right? What I would like to do is just kind of start off and just introduce both of you. So I have Beverly Vines
Yes. My last name
and
is Michelle now. Michelle?
oh, okay. So Beverly Michelle.
Yes.
And I have Andrea Pettyjohn
Yeah.
here. You know, with each one of the podcasts, we're talking about a theme. So overall, this podcast is focusing on destigmatizing substance use. What really drove home for me was getting the word out so that we can stop putting shame and guilt, that cycle on people with lived experience. But I think true healing comes when we stop taking away, when we remove the stigma and put the humanity back in people, right? So if thinking about this podcast out of all the series, right? So the series is about destigmatizing, but thinking about this particular podcast in which what we're on right now, what would you say the themes, what would you think the theme should be for this podcast?
No. Um,
So the theme, of course, I looked up. I went on good old chat, right?
Yes.
My partner. And so the theme that I got was the ripple effect, a mother and daughter's journey through addiction, incarceration, and hope.
Okay.
it sounds good.
Does that seem like it hit home?
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey. Of course, I invited you here, but talk to me about, where this journey began with, just your experience. And, I guess mom, maybe we can start talking about, so the individual that we're talking about is your son, your oldest son, right?
Yes. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what we would call him Chief,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That's what everybody called him. So we'll call him Chief. But Chief was when you know he was born in North Carolina. Him and Monty both were born there with my first husband. And I need to talk a little bit about that because that household, my husband was an alcoholic who drank almost every day. And he drank the hard booze, very hard booze. So whenever he drank, he changed. And I was the victim of his domestic abuse. So he would punch me, choke me, get me up out of bed, call me all kinds of names, chase me around the house. I would try to run from him and get away from him. And Glenn at the time, Chief at the time, was the oldest. So he was the one I believe that had the most effect on, because he was like maybe one going on like as an infant. He was born into that as an infant, and then he grew there until I left. I left when he was 2 years old, or maybe a little about two and a half. So he went through that the first couple years of his life. And Monty was just a little tiny baby, so he didn't get a lot of that, but there was so much going on. So much back and forth, confusion, just a lot of cursing, anger, and of course, I wasn't doing very good because, he was always pounding on me and beating me to almost to the point of death. Yeah.
Wow. So, there's this, I don't know if you know about the ACEs study, right? The ACEs study is the adverse childhood experience. Um, and it really is about 10 questions on there, and it's looking at the trauma that a child is exposed to up until 18. And so you're telling me that from a young boy, because if you think about what's on the actual study, it talks about whether there was any exposure to domestic violence in the home. It talks about, was there exposure to anyone using, or any incarceration, or having fear for yourself or others. So it talks about all these traumas. And you're saying, from a very young age, Chief had some exposure to trauma.
Yes. Yes. A lot of trauma. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so talk to me about gosh, I want to keep calling you Sister Bev.
Okay.
But talk to me about, because I feel like, are you, of course, we're here to talk about his journey, right? His journey through the struggle, and as
Mhm.
well as, what we proclaim to be his release, his victory, his place of not having to go through this rough journey anymore. But are you feeling like you're carrying that as a as a burden, or do you?
There was like a lot of guilt because I I blame myself for the bad choice that I made in choosing his to be with his dad. I should have known. I was very young. I was 21 years old. I was very young and probably immature. And I was right out of college. And when I met him, and so I probably didn't take the time to really get to know him. And what happened was I had gotten pregnant. I got pregnant and then so was forced to get married. Forced to get married, more or less. Yeah.
Okay. And Andrea, you can chime in at any given time. I
For this time. So
No, no, no. So
but
that's what happened that back then. Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess, I mean, just that, because again, we're here, this is a journey, right? Like, whether you were here for it or not, I think together as women, sometimes we have to recognize that, yes, we might not have raised our kids in an ideal circumstance,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It's the, when we know better, we do better. But how do how do we heal from that? How do we kind of rectify that? What do you do with that? Because I feel like it, in one way or another, you're still kind of, are you still holding that?
Well, I do know that after I lost my son, I lost him 2 years ago. He was murdered in Wilmington, and after that, I went through a really hard time. I and a brother of mine, a spiritual brother in the Lord, came to me one day in the gym and he said, "God told me to tell you you need to forgive yourself." And I never really thought about it, but I had prayed about it, and then it hit me one night when I was in Bible study, it just hit me. I guess the topic we were talking about, you know, this and um, one thing led to another, and I just started just crying emotionally, and I guess I never really let it out, and I guess I had blamed myself, for all the different things that Chief went through. I blamed him. I blamed, for marrying his father, and then I got into another relationship with Andrea's dad, and that wasn't a very good relationship. It was good and bad. It was good and bad, and I don't like to talk about the negative things with her here, but it was the way he treated Glenn. I don't know if Andrea knows about it, but he treated Glenn differently than he treated Andrea and Monty. He, constantly picked on him. And he was, he even at one point had punched him, and it had to be. He went to school, and of course the bruise mark. He told the nurse about it, and the nurse reported it, and then Russell was put out of the home for several months because he had abused my son, and that was when Chief was 8 years old. He was, I guess, seven, maybe seven. He was in second grade when that happened, and
Do
he
you
went to school, and he had been abused, and Russell was put out of the home for several months, and then he had to go to counseling, and after that, the marriage didn't really, it didn't, it just had some problems after that. Yeah,
well,
we had problems. Yeah,
did you feel like at the time that he was trying to discipline and just
maybe. Yeah, I think he was trying to discipline him, and he didn't know what to do, and he disciplined him too hard. He disciplined him when he was angry, when he got very angry and overdid it. Yeah.
I think without putting too much of his business out there, since he didn't agree to talk about it.
exactly? Yeah. we,
Either,
we can cut some of this out, so just know.
yeah, but we have talked about it. Obviously, it was really hard for me to have a relationship with my father as a result, because a lot of that I do remember, and it was something that kind of stuck with me because I knew it had a lifelong effect on Glenn. I don't call him Chief; I call him Glenn. But so for but we've talked about it, and I think what has helped me kind of in a sense understand or at least come to agreement on it as we talk about ripple effect. I think he was doing what he knew. um, him himself wasn't really didn't have the best of upbringing and was kind of moved around multiple times and abandoned and taken care of by other family members. And I think his in his way of trying to control things and trying to um, maybe protect him or even in his own mind discipline him, I think he just went about it the wrong way. Maybe being military added to that, but I think he just really had a hard time understanding the love part of discipline. And so he just looked at it as more like this is what needs to happen. Because when you talk to him, I mean, he really does love Glenn. I think he just didn't know how to handle that part.
So, and not to just stay on these, because Glenn is Chief Glenn, he's our discussion. But talk to me, even Andrea, if we could continue on about when you started noticing that something that Glenn was struggling. Was it behavior first before there was substance?
I think what has always been his. You mean like struggling as an adult, or you mean just because
As a
he's been kind of in he's been in and out of stuff since our childhood. And it's funny is as I was even preparing for the podcast, I was thinking back. There's not too much of my childhood that I remember, except for a couple times here and there of us kind of like playing. I'm the only sister and the baby sister. So for them, it was always, throwing football pads on me, and I would go out and play with them and everything like that. But once he started getting more adolescent age, he started making the wrong choices. And I think for him, he was just really trying to find his way, his path, his place, and acceptance. And I think he always just has a habit of choosing the wrong group. And so he began getting himself into trouble and started dabbling with alcohol. I'm not sure at that time in his teens if it was anything more than alcohol, but I know he was selling, and I know he was doing very adult-like things, which led him ultimately being in and out of jail even as a child. And so most of my childhood was going to visit him in prison. That was holidays, and it was horrible because I would go and and always leave crying. And then as an adult, I still remember when he finally did get out. I can't even say the last time, but one of the last times, he talked to me and he said that he really struggled with being out, just because if you think about it, I want to say you can probably answer this better than I, but I think he was in and out of juvenile detention in prison since he was like 10 or 11? 14. So
14.
If you think about all of that stuff that usually shapes who you are as a person, and what he had to do to survive in there kind of made up who he was. And so he had a hard time really functioning as a productive adult. And it was hard for him to kind of shift into, I don't have to lie, I don't have to be manipulative. It was hard for him to kind of take that off because he was so used to that lifestyle. And so it became harder even as an adult because, I never knew if it's like hard trying to guess, is he telling the truth right now? Is he not?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like that game. So it was always for me a little bit difficult because while I loved him, it was also frustrating to, be around because I didn't know if I could trust him in that moment because, he's because of his addiction, whether it's stealing from us or, it made him do some choices that he probably wouldn't have made with his right mind. So it just became.
You bring up something that really I wanted to kind of go back to. And this is where I feel like so many of us forget that person, right? Like, who was Glenn outside of juvie, or being an adjudicated youth, or incarceration? Who was Glenn from the core that you were able to see from the day that you gave birth to him? Who was Glenn?
One thing, he really loved football. He was a great, great football player, especially a great defensive player. He would be on the line, and there would be four of them, and they called them the Mighty Four, because nobody could get past them. And he just, I think, because of getting incarcerated at 14 because of a felony, that's what they did back then with juveniles that committed felonies. They put him in this special place, and it was just like a jail with the barbed wire and everything. And he had to stay there until he was 18. Yeah, so he missed school. He was in school part of the time, and then he missed, like I'd say for maybe half of the year he was there. And then after that, he left and was gone to this place. So, yeah.
So that goes back to what Andrea's saying, is those formative years, like from 14 to 18,
Mhm.
his, at the time that we would start to understand who I am as a boy, right? Like as a guy, those years were being defined behind bars.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They
I think
did.
it's also, though, important to say, just even getting back to what you asked of who he is, I think one thing that always has been a memory of mine is when we were little and somebody in the neighborhood was messing with me, and it was a girl. She was older. She was a teenager, and I had to have been like maybe 5 or 6. And I don't even remember what she did. She probably pushed me or something. By the time Glenn was done, I think she never came and bothered me again. But and that's just him, how he always was. He's always been a protector. And it doesn't even have to be family. It could be someone who he thinks that can't stand up for themselves. He just always had a really big heart, and which was ultimately what would get him in trouble, because he just genuinely cared about people, which I think I always see the parallel between him and my mom. They both have this, they tend to see the good in everyone, which is great, but sometimes you miss out on like reality. And I think sometimes he missed that part, but I think that's what's one of the things that was just so great about him. And he just had a really big heart, and he genuinely just loved people and loved being able to kind of protect everyone.
Yeah. And he loved animals.
Yeah,
he had such a love. Like when he was incarcerated, he was the only one there that had a guinea pig. The head of the was like a father, an older man. He was like a papa. He bought him a guinea pig, and he kept this guinea pig the whole entire time. And then, later on when he got out and stuff, he like had a dog, and he just always loved animals, just truly loves them. I mean, just cuddles them, loves them, which goes along with the protective part, of loving love, maybe the little animal, God used that for something that he could love on while he was gone. I don't know.
It made you feel what?
It made me feel like I didn't value myself very well. I thought I wasn't enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't tough enough. I just never was enough, But during this time that I've had, since I moved from Delaware, moved to Savannah, I spent a lot of time with God and alone with God, and God's been reminding me of who I really am and who He created me to be. And He was just reminding me that He was with me the whole time, through the times when there wasn't any money, when there wasn't anyone there to help me, or anyone there, to be there with me when I was going through a lot of the things that I went through. Yeah. Because there was a time when another thing I meant to tell you was my family had disowned me for 25 years. So I didn't have any touch with any family members, like my mother, father, my sisters and brothers. My mother was the only one that would stay in touch with me, and that was secretly. She would like send us like a little money here and there, or she would like slip down and visit us every now and then, but she was the only one. Everyone else had just shunned me out of their life. Yeah.
So you talk about not having your family there to support you, but
Mm.
talk a little bit more about that. What was going on? And then maybe, I wonder if, we talk about Glenn and his journey of trying to figure out who he was, right?
Yes.
And I struggle at times at trying to figure out whether this is relevant or not, but let's put it out there. Do you think a part of his struggle was the fact that he came from he was a mixed race child, right?
Yes, right. And he didn't have that extra support system that grandparents give you. He didn't have that growing up. He had nobody else.
Neither on either side.
No, on neither side. No. He did, have a little bit of help with his real father's family, but there was always confusion. There was guns and drugs being used and a lot of alcohol.
It wasn't healthy.
It wasn't very healthy.
No.
It wasn't a healthy atmosphere. Yes.
And
Yeah.
so do you think And maybe Andrea, play, I'm going to have this conversation with you again as well, pull you in. But do you think that a part of that whole identity, not having dad present, not, having the support of the extended family, but how much of it is Glenn having to understand, can I be white enough for my white peers, or can I be black enough for my black peers, or where did I fit in? Do you think that was a part of his story?
I think it definitely is a layer to it, and I can only say that because it was for me growing up, and from that same. I mean, we're talking like now it's probably a lot more accepting, but you're talking 80s, 90s, being pretty much black kids with a white woman. There were times we would get stopped in the store, looked at differently, and then out of the three of us, Glenn is actually the darkest. So that's why where he got the nickname Chief. A lot of people thought he was Indian because he had really jet black straight hair, and almost like a
Native American for
yes,
to be politically correct,
yes,
right?
sorry.
Indigenous,
Yes,
indigenous.
yes, sorry. My apologies. So that's why, like, honestly, a lot of people were so confused about who he was just racially because he really could kind of blend in with a lot of different because of his hair and his skin complexion because it was darker. They were just so confused. And so I think, growing up in that time was difficult. I know for myself too, it was kind of like, where do I fit in? And I really didn't I hate to say find myself, but find really what that looked like until I was in college. Because as much as I love my mother, she's a white woman. So she could only provide one side, as much as she tried. And she's really great in that she tried to
Oh yeah.
make sure that we were surrounded by other people, even if they weren't biologically our family. But that was a missing piece for us. And so it wasn't until I was in college where I was able to kind of like get into studies, get into readings. And for Glenn, he didn't have that. You know what I mean? So in and out of prison since 14. So I don't think there was really a time where he could be able to kind of do that. So, I never really thought about that, but I'm sure that had to also provide another layer to things.
Wow, that is. Mom, would you have anything to say about
I
or
just
thoughts about that?
I just feel like the drugs were like an escape for him. He escaped that part of his life. He would escape it, go into another place. And that's why I think the drug abuse started probably at a very young age. I want to say probably at 14, 15, he was starting maybe not very hard drugs, but I do know he eventually went to heroin. He was using heroin because I'll never forget the time when he first came and told me and my daughter both that he was addicted to heroin. And that was when he was a young adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he told us, he said, "What's wrong with me? You can't help." Because we wanted to take him to the hospital. And I said,
Right.
"What do you mean? What do you mean we can't help you?" And he said, "I thought he had the flu because he looked like he had the flu." And he was laying there on the sofa and he had looked like he had no life in him whatsoever. He really looked at the point of death, didn't he, Andre?
Yeah, he was a lot of shaking. He kept having the chills, couldn't really control his body temperature, and just was, yeah. And that's when he finally, because he was at my house, and I kept trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Like, what do you have? Because at first he said he just didn't, he literally showed up on my doorstep and just said he didn't feel well. And it wasn't until like maybe 24 hours into it that he finally was like, he said that he was going through withdrawals.
So what was that like for you guys? Like,
Well, I was shocked. I had no idea. I knew he told me about like different friends of his that were doing heroin, but he told me he would never ever do it. And then he told me that when he started living, I guess he was living with some friends that were doing heroin. He said that his friends, when he started doing it, it took away. He felt like he was stronger than the heroin, that he could stop at any time. But then he told me that he realized that it was stronger than he was. Heroin was stronger than we. He said, "I've never had any other drug like this. This is the strongest drug there is." And he said, "I found out that I was not stronger than heroin." That's what his words told me. That he told me exactly that.
And around what age do you remember or recall him having to start this had this battle with heroin?
I want to say it was probably late 20s.
Yeah, late
Yeah.
20s. Yeah,
Yeah.
he had been like in and out of like in and out of incarceration. Even when he was staying with me and Don, he was staying with me and Don for a while. He was doing good, and then he would get the police would pick him up, and they would say, "You have the nicest son." They said, "I hated to arrest him because he just went so willingly." Even the police liked him. It was just strange how the police had liked him in Delaware, but they liked him. They told me, they hated to arrest him, and every time I went in to see him when he was arrested, he would hold his head down and he would just cry like a baby. I would say to him, "I thought you were going to make it this time. I thought, Chief, I thought you told me you were going to, you were going to try to make it this time. And I hate to see you like this." I would tell him, and the shame would just come all over him, and he would.
But I would love to, let's have this conversation because of course, I'm not a stranger to this journey,
Yeah,
with my brother having a lived experience in, incarceration, being a part of it, you
yes,
know, but let's talk about it, what that does to the family, right? Like I can still remember one of the biggest arrests that I guess led to a substantial amount of time in my brother's life was, and I can remember my mom and dad and just coming home, and it was it was like somebody had died,
mm,
right? Like they were so distraught and detached, and we were all walking around, and I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And
mm,
it was only having to just sit and just wait for them to feed me little bits of information. Dad was totally shut down. Mom would give me a little bit, I guess, as her way of just trying to vent. But
mm,
what was these experiences like for you guys, right? Like between incarcerations, between not seeing him for a while. I mean, come on, we've all had that, right? Where like
Yeah.
where
So,
where is he,
I mean, there was definitely some times where it was kind of like anguish and distraught, but then there was a time where it was almost like a relief when he would get locked up because it was like, okay, so at least we have some time where we don't have to worry about him and he's going to be okay.
yeah,
You know what which is crazy to think about.
It
Um,
is, isn't it?
it's like, okay, you get the phone call that he's locked up and it's like, okay, so he's okay. It's like we don't have to worry about whether it's ODing or whether it's just
yeah,
getting shot or whatever the case may be. It's just like, okay, he's okay. So it was weird in the last few years that it got to that point where you almost kind of like, and there were times where we were like, I wish he kind of could. Remember I think it was one time, even his last time, you were asking almost like, could they keep him for a little while? It was just having that feeling
yeah,
of wanting him because he really did need kind of like a system because otherwise he was just going to be going out on the street. And it was difficult at that stage because of the level of addiction that he had. Um, he couldn't stay with us because we have family we had to look out for.
Yes.
And it was kind of like, because of the choices that he was making, it wouldn't be safe for him to be in the house. So he would come over, I would feed him and take care of him, and maybe he would stay the night here and there, but it would never be long term, just because, you just never know
Right.
what happened. But I do remember that, just kind of like almost like a sense of relief.
And then there was a time when he didn't get arrested. I'd say about 7 or 8 years. He wasn't arrested for anything at all, and he stayed out of trouble. He was working, and then that was during the pandemic was part of that. He was living with a girl up in Wilmington, and he stayed up in Wilmington a lot. And I would go to visit him and see him. And this girl was addicted too. You could tell she was skin and bones. I mean, she was a very loving girl. I just fell in love with her, and she fell in love with me. I mean, I just truly loved her. I felt like she was good for Chief, because she would try to. She was trying. She was really trying to get off. And I remember when she left him. They had been together 3 years, and when she left him, he cried like a baby. He called me, and I came up to see him, and he cried like a baby because she left. She left to get herself better, and he left her there all by himself, and he was just crying so bad because the only support system that he really had was her, and now she's
Mm.
gone. And he knew he couldn't come home to live where I lived because I had a 1 bedroom apartment, and it was just wasn't allowed to have any. I mean, he could come and spend the night, which he did a lot of times. He would come and spend the night, but he couldn't stay there. And but he kept going back up to Wilmington, kept going back, and he was incarcerated a couple times after she left. He got incarcerated because I remember going to see him. As a matter of fact, I went. Uh, the last not the last time that I saw him, but one of the last times that I saw him he was incarcerated, and I went in there, and after I left out, I cried like a baby, and he heard me
Mm.
crying because I had to leave him, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was, lived 2.5 hours away, and it was hard to get there on time, with all the traffic and all the stuff. If you were even a minute late, they wouldn't let you in, and it was just a really awful, awful place. But he remembers hearing me crying, and the other ladies were comforting me, but I just broke down and cried because I just hated to see him like that again. After so many years, here he was again. After 8 years being in prison, here he is again.
So what I hear you saying is that there was times that you felt like you had reprieve where he was connected, he was doing what he needed to do, and and in essence, I'll speak from my own experience. Do you ever feel like having a loved one with I call lived experience almost keeps you in, like, you're almost shell shock, right? Like you're almost like your nervous system never gets to zero
Yeah.
Yeah.
because you're always on guard at what if, and you live in that state, right? Like you don't ever come out of the what ifs. It's that phone call at night, or it's that, it's whatever. It's always something that's, here we go again. Like, I'm getting on this ride that I didn't even ask for.
Yeah, it is. It
And
is.
my son Monty had given up on him. He didn't have Monty's support any longer. Monty wouldn't give him anything, wouldn't do anything for him. Monty had completely given up on him. He didn't trust him.
Can we see though that might be almost like a way of, we got to save ourselves? It
Yeah,
gets
I
it
mean,
gets to a point.
he's doing.
I'll be honest, at the end there, I was kind of there. There would be times where I wouldn't answer his phone call, or, you know, it would just be kind of like, And even when he went missing and we weren't sure where he was, I was the main one telling mom, it's okay. This is what he does. Like, and I was literally just thinking, everything is fine. It wasn't really until, I think it was Mother's Day when he didn't call that I knew, okay, something's wrong, because he would never, I don't care. He could be homeless. He could be on the street, whatever the case, he's going to find some kind of phone, even if he has to call collect to call her. So it wasn't until then that I was like, okay, something is wrong. But yeah, I mean, towards the end there, it was kind of like you had to. It was like almost like detached, becoming a little bit detached from it, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of break from it. It was like, if I just don't think about it right now, then I won't have to hear about the being disappointed again.
Andrea, you and I, as sisters, right? I feel like I have the privilege to be able to detach at times, but I cannot imagine. And my mom has thrown this to me before, you know, and she would be like, "But could you ever imagine being the mother?"
No,
Right?
no.
And
It wasn't until we lost him that it's funny. Most of my morning, and I'm sorry, but most of my morning was actually not as a sister. It was as a mom myself, putting myself in my mom's shoes. I was thinking of my own children and thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine how that feels, as a sister, it was easier. It is easier for me because it's not
yeah,
my child. That bond that you have with the child is just totally different. So
it is.
most of the mourning that I did, even in losing him, was for her, and the crying was for her, because I knew how much she loved him and how much of an attachment that they had, and a bond that they had. And
Yeah.
my heart just ached for her as a mom, because I know she looked forward to those phone calls and those talks, and now that's something she won't have, and I just couldn't imagine that as a mother going through that.
That's really powerful. That
Yeah.
was really powerful. Yeah.
Remember on Mother's Day, he was still missing. We hadn't heard anything. And I remember I just have such a close relationship with God. And my close relationship with God, sometimes I can, if I listen, I'm real still and get before Him, I can hear Him talking to me. He'll talk to my heart. And He spoke to me that day. I was down by the water on Mother's Day, and He spoke to me. There was nobody around there but just me and Him. And He said, I had to take him, Bev, because he was suffering. And I don't know what that meant. I don't know what God meant still to this day. I don't know if he meant he was suffering from the addiction to heroin, because it was such a strong addiction. I don't know if it means he was suffering physically in his body, but I do know he said I had to take him. And you'll find out this week, you'll get a call. And Lord, behold, I went to the gym the very next day, that not Monday, but Tuesday, when I went to the gym. I had gotten into the gym, and the detective called me, and he said, we found his body. And he said, well, at first he said, we're coming to see you. And I gave him my address, and he said, we'll be there Thursday. And then he called me back and said, we can't wait that long. We got to tell you. We found his body, and they told me all about it. But what they told me and everything doesn't add up. None of it adds up. And so when Andrea and I we went up to Wilmington, we were asking questions around the bank area where they found him. They found him in a parking garage in the Chase Bank. And we talked to a security guard, and she told us, I heard somebody moaning. I heard him moaning. And we didn't know where it was coming from. And until later on, we had this terrible smell. And that's when we went in and found his body. But the gate too, the air duct had been locked and closed, and nobody will tell me anything. I don't know. I'm still at the point where I need to know something. Did someone put him in there? Did he fall in there? But then, in order to fall in there, he would have to have climbed 3 stories up a smooth building. I can't picture him doing that. I just can't picture him doing that at all.
Yeah.
So something's not fitting. Something's not working out. You know.
And so where does this leave you? Are you able to find, how do you find your peace? How do you find your peace in this journey? Do you feel, that this becomes a place, or do you feel that Chief is at peace?
Well, I do know that one of the girls he had dated contacted me and said she had a dream. And in the dream, she saw him as an angel in heaven. And she said he spoke to her. This angel spoke to her and said, I want you to tell my mom that I'm okay, that I made it by the hair of my chinny chin chin. And it sounds just like it sounds like he would talk like that, which makes me feel like maybe in those last moments that he called upon God, because I remember even at a young age, I would have devotions with my children. I would have devotions with them, and I would just, each one of them, I would pour into God and lay my hands on him and pray for him. And I know, a lot of times they didn't want to go to church, but they would go to church with me, up until they left home and couldn't, had to make choices for their own self. But they always went to church with me, so I know that they heard the word of God all the time, and not only, but I tried to live it the best that I could, even though I wasn't a perfect mom. I tried to live it. And I just feel like in those last moments, maybe he called upon the Lord. Maybe he knew, and he was suffering so much that he called upon the Lord and said,
Yeah.
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 That's the only thing I can hope and think of. And that's what my pastor had told me at the time. Pastor Angie Cannon from Delaware had told me. She said, he probably called upon the Lord during that time. She said, none of us ever know. And she said that late, I believe God sent that guard to you to tell you she heard the moaning. She heard someone moaning so that you know that he was put in there alive, or he was alive in that air duct, which I have never seen and cannot picture it, but I've tried to look online to see what they look like, but it's like a little skinny air duct they said he fell down into. And that's where all the broken ribs came from in his body.
Yeah.
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 I think for me, what brings me peace is knowing that I just always try to think of my memories of him and not so much the struggles. Um, Even though the struggles are a part of the story, I feel like, you know, I'll never forget his heart and how much he loved me. And I'm just happy that he is free from just the burden of it. I know he wanted to live a better life deep down. He wanted to. And I think he just really did not know how. And I think he was just fighting so hard to do that and to live a life. And I think so for that, it makes me feel at least a little bit better knowing that he's free from that burden of having to fight,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine it's how hard that had to have been for him to want to be free and not be able to be.
So I'm going to leave you with this, or I want to end with this question, which I thought was a really powerful question. And I sent you some of them, but the last one, which was, if you could say, could get a message to him, if you could say something to him, what would you say to him now? If you believed that, well, we believe that he hears, right?
Mhm.
What would you say as sister, as mom? What would you say to Chief? What would you say to Glenn?
For me, I would just say, and it's something that I have continued to say, because there are times where I do talk to him, whether or not he hears me or whatever. But I think one thing I do say to him is that I love him, and I always thank him for the way that he loved me, that I received his love and I felt his love. There's not a day that he was here that I didn't feel that love. And even now that he's not here, there are times where I feel his presence, whether that's a memory of his presence or whatever, but it's something that I hang on to. And I just appreciate the big brother that he was to me and that he's always been to me because he was really the true essence of what a big brother should be.
I just truly believe by carrying on his message. I hate bullying. I hate bullies. One reason why he was kicked out of Teen Challenge was because there was a bully in there and he stood up to the bully because he was picking on all of his friends, and he got kicked out of there, and the bully was the son of a pastor, a big pastor that contributed to Teen Challenge. So of course they did nothing to him, but they kicked him out. And so I just feel like carrying on his passions. He had like a passion for sports, and I love that passion. And I have a passion for sports, passion, and then the passion just to love everybody I see, and help everyone, and just give people a word of kindness. Sometimes just I saw an older lady coming out of the store, and she was like limping and bent over. And then she went into the store, and God told me there were some roses, and He said, buy those roses and give it to her. And I bought the roses that I saw on the front of the store in the little thing, and I gave them to her, and I said, I don't know when the last time you had flowers, but I just wanted to give you this and tell you that Jesus loves you so much. And she started weeping and crying. And she said, thank you so much. She said, it has been such a long time. And she just cried when I gave them to her.
Oh,
I just believe I just believe by doing things like that, just giving to other people, giving them a word of love or giving them a word of kindness. Because Chief would always, he was always talking about that. He was always saying, why are people not talking? Why don't they say hello? Or why are they so mean? He hated like people that were prejudiced, and he didn't hate the people, but he hated the way they treated other people. He was so against that. And I just feel like I need to carry those messages on for him, because they made such a impact on me. And if he was here today, I would also tell him I miss him so much. And I miss the way he loved me, because he loved me just the way a son is supposed to love a mother. He would never ever let me like lift anything too heavy, or never ever let me be hurt. He would always stand up for me, and I miss having that part of him, with me now.
and this is our ending, but what would you say to people that are listening? Again, this is about how we destigmatize substance use, but what would you say to the families who have find themselves in this journey themselves? What would you say as a mother or a sister or a family member to the people that might be listening that need to hear either a word of encouragement or a sense of direction, or just to get a basic understanding of what they may need to do?
I do know that I went to like a lot of support groups at Crossroad Community Church. They had substance abuse support groups, and different churches, different things had different, and they always tell you the tough love. But I would just say to a mom or to a dad that they need to listen to their heart. They really need to listen to their heart and do what their heart is telling them to do. Because I don't know about like I don't know if tough love is truly the answer, by not doing anything, because you you do have to do some things to keep them alive. You do have to give them food, and I would always give them food. You do have to give them a place to stay sometimes. You just can't kick them out. And so I would tell them that they would need to listen to their heart and ask God to show them what how to love this child that's addicted now.
Oh my, that's really powerful. I don't know if the tragedy of Rob Reiner and his wife, and
Yeah,
he was on an interview, and he had said that himself, where he was riddled with guilt because just really struggling with that. He was being told, from the 12 step. Or just from the community to be able to, oh no, we got to let them hit bottom, we got to give them
yeah,
tough love. And I found myself even as a provider, right? And you start to realize, no, this isn't. And I love that. Like we got to treat each case differently, right? And
yeah,
I and you've got to figure out and use some level of discernment of
Yeah.
what that looks like, and when it looks like, when to rescue, and so I love that.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think just to connect to that too is just to remember who they are and not allow the addiction to kind of cloud how you see them. Because sometimes it's hard, because that's what's in your face, and that's what you see. So I would just say to try to remember who they are and to continue to allow that to shape your decisions and how you handle things. Because I think, at the end of the day, there's still that person. It may be hidden beneath all the struggles and everything else, but that's still who they are. And, at the end of the day, they need love too. They need a family, they need support. Sometimes they need a hand, even if it's a hand again and again and again. If my
Yes.
brother was here, I would still give a hand. It wouldn't matter,
yeah,
but just to remember who they are.
yeah.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you want to say or share?
I just want everyone to know that I could not have went through everything that I went through without God being by my side and Him, encouraging me and giving me, whispering little things to me to do. And um, I just could never have made it. I really felt like I almost lost my mind at times. I really felt like I almost lost my mind, but God kept me through it all. Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome.
Hey y'all, it's Teray again. Now you've heard the conversation. Now we want to hear from you. Take a moment to click the link in the description to our post survey so you can share what stood out to you, what challenged you, and what inspired you. Always remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember that one conversation can spark a new beginning. Bye.